I thought I knew every corner of our home, until the drawer betrayed me. Morning light spilled across the wooden floor, thin and forgiving. I had been sorting things for donation, trying to clear space that no longer needed to hold so much of our past. The scent of cedar rose from the dresser, familiar, comforting. I was 57, married for more than half my life, still believing that the ordinary drawers of our house contained nothing but the remains of a good marriage. When my fingers brushed the edge of an envelope, dust clung to my skin like guilt. It was thicker than the others, sealed, deliberate. Inside lay a folded certificate, yellowed but intact. The ink bled faintly along its creases. My husband's name appeared first, steady and proud. Beside it, written in another hand, was a woman I had never met, identified as his lawful wife. For a moment, the room stilled. Even the clock seemed to pause, unwilling to strike against what I had just seen. My breath caught in my throat. The air smelled of paper gone old and secrets gone sour. I whispered his name once, as though it might change what was printed before me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the certificate trembling between my fingers. The house hummed with all the noises I had stopped noticing. The refrigerator's buzz, the faint whistle of air through the vent, the murmuring silence that followed each sound. I thought of the years spent building this life, of every promise that now felt counterfeit. I opened the window for air. Outside, the garden waited, its earth damp from last night's rain. That garden was our shared ritual. He planted, I watered. It was our rhythm, our proof of harmony. But today, even the flowers looked complicit, bending toward the light as if to avoid my eyes. He would be home by noon. I folded the certificate again, pressing its edges sharp, sliding it back where it came from. My pulse refused to slow. I stared at my reflection in the glass, someone I recognized but no longer understood. "You always said there were no secrets between us," I whispered. My voice cracked on the lie. The smell of old paper lingered on my fingertips, stubborn as truth. I rubbed my hands together until warmth returned, but the ghost of that scent stayed. I looked around the room, our bed, our photographs, our matching rings on the dresser, and realized each object could testify against me or against him, depending on who told the story. A part of me wanted to confront him instantly, to shout the discovery into his calm eyes, but another part, the one that had endured decades of patience, chose silence. I would wait, I would watch. Truth deserved witnesses, not noise. I slipped the photograph from the bedside table into my lap. The frame's silver edge glinted beneath the morning light. We were smiling in that picture, holding hands, unaware that betrayal can bloom quietly in the same soil as love. My thumb traced the outline of his face until my hand began to shake. The world outside continued, cars passing, a child laughing down the street. Normalcy mocked me. I placed the photograph back on the table, aligning it carefully as if control could be restored through symmetry. "I'll find out why," I whispered to no one. The words barely escaped my lips, but the vow inside them burned steady. The scent of cedar thickened as I closed the drawer, sealing the secret for now. It wasn't denial, it was strategy. The warmth of our life had become my enemy, and I knew the first lie had already taken root. The signature wasn't mine. He asked for salt. I heard only silence. Dinner had always been our ritual. Same tablecloth, same chipped teacups, the same gestures worn into habit. That night, his laughter carried no warmth. I poured soup into his bowl and watched the steam rise between us like a veil we both pretended not to see. He talked about work. I nodded at the right moments, pretending to listen, pretending I didn't already know there was someone else behind that new softness in his voice. The scrape of his spoon against the porcelain cut through the air, sharper than any accusation. "Everything okay?" I asked, though the question felt rehearsed. "Of course," he said too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" I smiled, small, deliberate, the smile of someone performing calm while their heart writes down every detail for later. His phone vibrated once on the table, screen face down. I stared at it for a second too long. He noticed. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "So have you." The kettle whistled from the counter, a thin, desperate cry that filled the silence neither of us wanted to break. I turned it off, my hand steady only because I willed it to be. The scent of chamomile rose into the room, but even that sweetness felt wrong now, tainted by pretense. He looked down at his bowl again. "You're acting strange." "Maybe I finally learned it from you." His eyes flickered, one heartbeat of truth before the mask settled back in place. He reached for his teacup, fingers brushing mine, and I pulled away as though the contact burned. I knew I couldn't confront him yet, not without proof, not without control. So I watched, quietly, taking inventory of every habit that didn't fit. The late-night messages, the new shirts, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't mine. Later that evening, after he'd fallen asleep on the couch, I picked up his phone. It wasn't locked. A list of messages glowed on the screen, the latest from a name I didn't recognize. I opened it. Simple words, no flourishes. "Good night, love." My breath caught. My reflection in the darkened screen looked like a stranger's face. I took a picture of the text, saved it in a hidden folder. The sound of a car passing outside masked the tremor in my hand. He stirred slightly and murmured something, half a word, soft and slurred. I froze. He said her name. I sat there for a moment, heart pounding, the echo of that name ringing louder than any truth I'd ever known. The house felt colder than usual. The clock ticked, each second an accusation. I walked into the kitchen again, turned on the light, and stared at the folded paper in my drawer, the one I'd found days ago, the marriage certificate. The pieces fit now, but I needed time. Time to build the case, to steady myself before tearing everything apart. In the quiet, I began writing, just notes at first, small fragments of deceit. The time he left, the calls he didn't take, the receipts he forgot to hide. My handwriting looked calm, detached, almost clinical. But inside, I was breaking. When I heard him shift again, I deleted the message I'd taken from his phone. I didn't need to keep it, not yet. The proof was no longer digital. It lived inside me now, carved too deep to erase. I returned to bed and lay still, eyes open, listening to his breathing. For a moment, he whispered her name again, softer this time, almost tender. The ceiling fan hummed above me like an old confession, circling and circling, but never stopping. He said her name in his sleep. The mailman knew more than I did. He stood at the gate that morning, smiling faintly as he handed me a thick envelope. I almost didn't take it. Most mail was bills or bank circulars, but the return stamp caught my eye. Family court records. The words pulsed like a quiet warning. It was addressed to my husband, not us, him. I turned the envelope in my hands, feeling the paper's weight, the faint ridges of an official seal pressed deep into the surface. The texture felt alive, as though the truth had left fingerprints there long before I touched it. I should have waited for him to open it. That would have been the moral thing to do. But morals dissolve when betrayal already stains the air. Inside, the letter began, plainly. Confirmation of prior marriage registration, filed 15 years ago, reference ID 9FF144B. 15 years. We had been married 12. My knees went weak. The kitchen chair was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I read the line again, slower, my lips moving soundlessly. Beneath the text, a signature from the county registrar, dated, stamped, legal. My throat tightened, not from shock, but from recognition. The ink had faded, yet it still carried the authority of truth. The rain started outside, soft at first, tapping the window like cautious fingers. It mirrored the pulse in my chest. I folded the letter carefully, once, twice, then stared at my reflection in the window pane. The woman looking back seemed calm, but her hands trembled. By noon, I found myself walking to the small postal branch 2 streets over. The mailman, Tom, his name tag read, looked up in surprise. "Back so soon?" he said. I laid the envelope on the counter. "This came to my address. It shouldn't have." He frowned, adjusted his glasses, and checked his ledger. "Strange. That tracking number matches a batch I delivered to Maple Street last month. Same surname, though." "Maple Street?" The words burned as I said them. That was where the other woman lived. The name from the text message. Tom looked uncomfortable, lowering his voice. "Must have been rerouted by mistake. Happens sometimes." "Does it?" I asked. He hesitated. "Not with court letters." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air smelled of wet paper and ink, heavy and cold. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a duplicate slip, delivery record 5C17, and handed it to me. "You didn't get this from me," he murmured. I nodded, slipping it into my bag. The proof felt heavier than any secret I'd ever carried. Walking home through the drizzle, the streets looked blurred, the houses bending slightly through the haze. I remembered how my husband always insisted on checking the mail himself, even small things. I'd thought it was routine. Now I knew better. Back inside, I placed the letter on the table and stared at it as if it might change under the light. The postmark gleamed faintly. 3 faded lines crossing a date that belonged to another life. I made a copy, careful not to smudge the ink, and sealed both versions in separate folders. One went into the drawer beside the photograph of us from our anniversary. The other I hid in a tin box beneath the sink, beside the cleaning supplies he never touched. By evening, the rain turned into a storm. Each drop against the glass sounded like a knock I didn't want to answer. I sat by the window, the letter opener in my hand catching flashes of lightning. There was no going back now. The evidence wasn't just on paper. It was in me. When I finally checked the return address again, the handwriting beside the postmark stopped me cold. The slant of the letters, the careful loop of the L. I'd seen it before, on our wedding invitation. The address matched his handwriting. He laughed at dinner, and I saw the mask slip. That sound, easy, polished, too smooth, had once been the rhythm of my comfort. Tonight, it made my stomach turn. He told a story from work, something about a client mix-up, and the others laughed. But I watched him, really watched him. His eyes didn't join his smile. They darted, restless, waiting for me to blink first. The next morning, I decided to stop pretending. I dressed carefully, the way I used to when I still believed appearances meant truth. The sun hit my wristwatch, its cracked face flashing like a silent alarm. I told myself I was only visiting his office to bring lunch, but that was a lie I didn't bother disguising. When I arrived, his secretary hesitated before greeting me. "He's in a meeting," she said, but her glance toward the inner door betrayed her. I thanked her, stepped inside anyway. His desk looked staged, clean, too deliberate. But it wasn't the emptiness that caught me. It was the photograph tucked behind a stack of files, half hidden but not forgotten. A woman stood beside him, her arm looped through his, both of them smiling like they'd been caught mid-promise. I didn't touch the frame. I didn't have to. The air in the room changed, the kind of quiet that makes your pulse audible. "Looking for something?" I turned. He stood at the doorway, still wearing that same social smile. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said evenly. "You did." He walked closer, too close. His cologne, something expensive, made the air feel heavy. "That photo," I said. He glanced toward it, then back to me. "Old client dinner." "Is that what you call her?" He blinked once, then laughed. "You're imagining things." "No," I said, stepping aside so the light from the desk lamp cut across both our faces. "I'm remembering things." His jaw tightened. "You're out of line." "I found the letter," I said quietly. "Family court records." The silence that followed wasn't hesitation, it was calculation. His mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, I saw the man behind the charm, small, frightened, cornered by his own lies. "Careful," he said finally. "You don't know what you're talking about." I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. My voice stayed calm. "I know enough. The rest will follow." His laugh cracked this time, sharp and brittle. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did." He moved to grab the phone, but I stepped back, the glow from the lamp flickering between us. The light stuttered once, as if unsure which of us to expose. That was when I realized the truth didn't need shouting. It only needed a witness. As I left the office, one of his coworkers, Mark, I think, looked up from his desk, eyes full of sympathy he didn't voice. I paused just long enough for him to whisper, "You're not wrong." His words felt like permission to keep going. Outside, the sky hung low, gray and humming with unspoken thunder. I replayed the short recording in my pocket once, just to hear my own voice steady and unbroken. That night, I didn't wait for him at dinner. I locked the bedroom door and slept alone for the first time in years. The sheets felt colder, but so did my resolve. From that day forward, there would be no shared bed, no shared trust, no pretending that laughter meant peace. The lamp in the hallway flickered as I turned it off, a pulse of warning before the dark settled in. He changed the locks the next day. The debt collector thought I was her. His voice on the phone was polite, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "we're calling about the overdue balance of $8,000. The number hit me like cold water. I almost laughed. "You must be mistaken," I replied. "I don't have any loans." He paused, then read the details. My name, my address, my husband's name listed as co-applicant. The only problem was I hadn't signed anything, and the woman listed as co-signer beside his name wasn't me. The next day, I went to the bank myself. The marble counter felt like ice beneath my fingertips. Every sound in the room, pens clicking, papers rustling, the faint echo of heels, seemed to draw attention to my shaking hands. "I'm here to question a loan taken under my name," I said. The banker, a woman about my age, looked at me with concern. "Do you have the reference ID?" I handed her the notice that had arrived by mail. She typed for a moment, then her eyes widened slightly. "It's a joint loan, opened 10 years ago. The cosigner, it says spouse." I swallowed hard. "Then why don't I remember signing it?" She hesitated. "Would you like to see the file?" I nodded, gripping my purse tighter. When she slid the papers toward me, my stomach turned. My signature was there, smooth, practiced, perfect, but not mine. The loops were too careful, the slant too even. It was a forgery done by someone who knew me well. "How much?" I asked. $12,000 borrowed," she said softly, "with $8,000 unpaid. That's a total of $20,000 including interest." The numbers looked unreal on the page, black ink bleeding across lies. "And who handled the approval?" She flipped through the documents. "It went through the central branch, same employee ID that processed your husband's business account." I pressed my hand flat against the counter. The chill of the marble grounded me, but only barely. My reflection in the glass window looked faint, like someone erased from her own life. "Can I have a copy of this?" I asked. "I shouldn't," she began, then saw something in my eyes that stopped her. She made a discreet photocopy, slid it into a manila folder, and whispered, "You didn't get this from me." Outside, the sunlight felt merciless. I walked straight to a legal office 2 blocks away, gripping the folder like a weapon. The advisor listened carefully as I laid everything out. The fake signature, the duplicate addresses, the overlapping accounts. "It's fraud," he said simply, "but proving it means exposing him. You'll have to be ready for what comes with that." I nodded. "He stole my name. He doesn't get to keep my silence, too." He tapped a document with his pen. "I can file a formal request for verification. It'll take time, but once the handwriting analysis returns, it'll be undeniable." "Do it," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You understand this could cost you, financially, socially." I interrupted him. "Everything worth keeping, I've already lost." That night, I opened my old account book at home. Every number, every receipt told the story of a woman who believed her life was intact. Now each entry looked different, tainted by the lie beneath it. The vow I made wasn't loud. It was carved in silence. I would reclaim my name. Before sleeping, I checked the folder again, tracing the printed date in the corner. The paper was worn, yellowed with time. The timestamp caught my breath. June 14th, the same day we were married. The account was opened on our wedding day. Faith had always comforted me, until it concealed him. I went to the church that morning because I still wanted to believe in something that couldn't lie. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that flattens even sound. Inside, the air was colder than outside, thick with wax and quiet. My shoes echoed once against the marble. Then silence swallowed the sound whole. The priest recognized me. His smile faltered before it even began. "It's been a while," he said, voice soft but cautious. "I'm looking for a record," I told him. "Marriage or baptism? About 15 years ago." He hesitated, fingers tightening around the small cross hanging from his neck. "Records like that aren't for public review. Then you'll need to pretend I'm not the public." He looked away, toward the altar. The candles there flickered like they were listening. I followed him into a small side room, the one that smelled of wax and old paper, the smell of faith preserved too long. He opened a ledger, its edges browned and fragile. The spine cracked softly when he turned the pages. My eyes caught the handwriting, careful but trembling, and then his signature. His, the man I once called husband. The priest froze when he saw where I was looking. "You shouldn't read that." "I shouldn't have to," I said. He rubbed his temples. "You don't understand. I performed that ceremony, yes, but under pastoral confidentiality, I can't disclose names." My breath left me in a sharp laugh. "Confidentiality? You blessed a lie, Father." He lowered his gaze. "Sometimes faith demands silence. Then maybe silence is the sin." The words hung between us. One candle on the desk sputtered, throwing a short-lived flare of light across his face. For a moment I saw guilt there, raw and human, but it vanished behind clerical calm. "Was she local?" I pressed. He shook his head slowly. "Don't make me say what you already know." That broke something in me. The steadiness I had built from weeks of pain faltered. "You married him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You gave him God's permission to live 2 lives. He stepped closer, eyes pleading. "Please understand. I thought he was a widower. He came to me grieving. He said his wife—" "She was very much alive," I cut in. "She still is." His lips moved as though to pray, but no sound followed. I watched his hands tremble as he closed the ledger, sealing the evidence between its pages like a confession buried too deep. "What's the entry number?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, then turned the book just enough for me to see it. 47. I memorized it instantly. Proof, even when cloaked in holiness, still had a number. As I stood to leave, he said, "You'll destroy him." "No," I said, pausing at the doorway. "He did that himself." The candle nearest the altar flickered again, burning low, its wax pooling onto the brass stand. The flame fought to survive, then steadied, then broke. I walked out into the rain, the sound of it washing the stone steps behind me. My faith didn't break that day. It shifted. It stopped asking for comfort and started demanding answers. When I reached the gate, I turned once more to look inside. The last candle I had lit was almost gone, its flame bending in surrender. The candle burned down to nothing. Her eyes carried my wedding day. When she opened the door, the world seemed to stop. For a second, I thought I was looking into a mirror, older, softer, but unmistakably familiar. The same quiet grace, the same silver band on her hand. Only the house behind her told a different story. Warm walls, laughter faintly echoing from somewhere inside. She smiled politely. "You must be here about the message." I nodded. My throat was dry. The scent of lavender drifted from the hallway, the same perfume I used to wear every Sunday. It was like walking through my own past. "Please," she said gently, "come in." The living room was tidy, almost too perfect, as though she'd been expecting me but didn't know why. On the mantel sat a framed photograph. Him, in the same suit he'd worn when he married me, the same smile, the same ring. I felt the air leave my lungs. "That picture," I whispered. She turned, proud but calm. "Our wedding day. He said it was his second chance at happiness." Second chance. The words hit harder than any slap. I sank into the nearest chair before my knees gave out. She noticed. "Are you all right?" I looked at her, really looked. There was kindness there, innocence even. "You believe he's dead," I said quietly. Her eyes flickered. "He passed 2 years ago. Accident, they said. The bank settled the insurance." I laughed then, hollow and sharp. "He's very much alive." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. "What are you saying?" "I buried his lies, not his body." She covered her mouth, her voice trembling. "That's impossible." "Is it?" I took out my phone, swiping to the recording I'd made weeks ago. His voice, unmistakable, talking to the lawyer about forged documents. The sound filled the room like a haunting. She sat down slowly, the lavender scent thick now, almost choking. "He used us both." I nodded. 2 wives, 2 lives, one man who believed he could vanish between them. She looked toward the photograph again, then at the bracelet on her wrist. "He gave me this on our anniversary." I stared at it. Silver with a tiny engraving on the clasp. My bracelet had the same. I lifted my sleeve. The match was perfect. Her breath caught. "He gave you one too." "Of course he did," I said. "He never created love. He replicated it." The tears came then, uninvited. I hated that she saw mine, and yet I saw hers too. For a strange moment, there were no sides left. Only ruins. "I thought I hated you," she said softly. "I thought you were the ghost between us." "I was," I admitted, "until I saw you." She walked to the cabinet, pulling out an album, the cover worn, corners bent. "If I had known," her voice cracked. "He lied even about his death certificate." I switched on my phone's recorder again, setting it quietly beside the album. "Keep talking," I said. "Every detail matters now." She hesitated, then nodded. "He used a company in his own name, different state. The address on the papers isn't real. I tried calling once. The number didn't exist." Proof layered over proof, lies folded inside lies. As I stood to leave, she followed me to the door. The mirror beside the entryway caught our reflection. 2 women bound by the same deception. Neither enemy, neither wife anymore, just witnesses. Outside, the air smelled of rain and lavender. I turned back to her one last time. "We can end this," I said. She held my gaze, steady now, her strength mirrored in mine. "Then let's end it together." We decided to face him together. He called it misunderstanding. The law called it fraud. The courthouse smelled of polish and tension. Papers shuffled like whispers, and every step echoed against the tiled floor. The folder in my hands felt heavier than truth itself, thick with evidence, signatures, and betrayal pressed flat between rough paper. Beside me, she, the woman who once wore my ring's twin, stood quiet, determined. We didn't speak, but the silence between us had changed. It wasn't pain anymore, it was purpose. Our attorney met us by the wooden table outside courtroom 3. "Once we file," he said, "it becomes public record. You're ready for that?" I looked at the folder. "He made our pain public long before this." He nodded, sliding the documents across the counter toward the clerk. The texture of the paper rasped under his fingers, a sound like something being unearthed. The clerk glanced up, impassive. "2 complainants, 1 defendant?" "Yes," I said. "Same man, 2 marriages, same date, 2 addresses." Her pen froze mid-air. "That's impossible." "Not for him," I replied. I watched as the first stamp fell, a deep official thud that seemed to shake the air. The ink spread like bruises. Each affidavit detailed the same pattern: forged signatures, duplicate tax filings, overlapping marriage registrations. On one page, his name appeared twice, identical handwriting, same date, same vow. My stomach twisted. "He didn't even bother to change the details," I murmured. The attorney's eyes softened. "That's what makes it undeniable." He flipped through the evidence, a bank ledger showing shared withdrawals, property transfers, and a life built on duplication. "He's been running this deception for years," he said. "The financial trail will corner him faster than emotion ever could." I traced the edge of the gavel mark embossed on the filing page. "Then let the law speak where faith stayed silent." Across the table, the second woman exhaled. "He told me it was all a misunderstanding," she whispered. "He even said you were gone." I met her eyes. "He told me you didn't exist." Her jaw tightened. "Then let him explain both truths under oath." The attorney adjusted his tie. "Court scheduling will confirm within 2 weeks. Once the summons is issued, he can't avoid it." 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare for a confrontation, a lifetime in the making. Outside, reporters milled by the steps, cameras hanging like vultures waiting for movement. I could already feel the weight of their curiosity, the story of 2 women and 1 man's empire of lies. "You'll be questioned," the attorney warned gently. "Every detail, every year, every dollar. Are you ready to relive it all?" I looked at him, steady. "I've been reliving it for 20 years. It's time someone else does too." The second woman touched my arm lightly. "If we fall apart in there." "We won't," I said. "He counted on us staying silent. We're not silent anymore." When we stepped into the courtroom, the hum of voices swelled, a low tide of speculation and judgment. The judge entered, robe trailing like the shadow of authority itself. The first sound was the gavel, sharp, echoing, final. The courtroom hushed instantly. It was the sound of battle beginning. But this time, not one fought in whispers or bedrooms. The attorney leaned closer. "Once these are filed," he said quietly, "there's no going back." I nodded. "Good." He handed the case folder to the clerk. The texture of the paper scratched against the wood, and with it went everything: our privacy, our illusion, our restraint. For the first time, truth wasn't something hidden in drawers or whispered through walls. It was printed, signed, and stamped for the world to see. As the clerk entered the final notation, her pen paused on the registry. She frowned. "That's strange." "What is it?" I asked. She turned the open page toward us. His name was there, written twice, bold and unapologetic, like it belonged to 2 lives instead of 1. His name appeared twice in the registry. When truth became loud, my friends grew quiet. At first it was subtle, the pauses in messages, the half-hearted, "hope you're okay" texts, the dinners I wasn't invited to anymore. Then it shifted. Words I'd never said began spreading like wildfire, names twisted, motives rewritten. The town that once smiled at me now whispered behind glass. The first time I saw the post, I thought it was a mistake, a local forum thread, anonymous but cruel, painting me as the woman who destroyed a man's reputation for money. "She's after his estate," one comment said. Another, "2 wives, sure, but she planned it." Every sentence felt like another nail closing over my voice. The second wife called that night, her tone brittle. "My family's pulling out," she said quietly. "They don't want to be dragged through the mud." I didn't blame her, but the silence that followed was louder than anger. My phone became a battlefield. Every vibration a warning, every notification a wound. Screenshots, false claims, speculation about who I was, what I wanted. "Greedy widow," they called me. "Liar." I scrolled until my hands trembled, until the words blurred. Then I turned it off. The silence after the shutdown was almost peaceful, until it wasn't. A message arrived from a private number. 1 line, "He's behind it." I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "Who is this?" A new message. Check your email. Folder name. Thread archive. I opened my laptop with shaking fingers. The sound of each keystroke echoed through the quiet room. There it was, a chain of emails between him and someone named Consultant PR04. Lines of instruction, payments noted, a strategy laid out like a confession. Discredit the women, flood the town's groups, twist sympathy into suspicion. He'd built his defense the way he built his lies, with precision. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer, attaching one note: proof of manipulation. Please verify authenticity. It was almost midnight when my only real friend, Mark, called. I saw the posts, he said. I tried to defend you. What happened? They deleted my comments. Then I was blocked. The line went quiet for a moment, just the faint hum of connection between us. Listen, he said finally. Don't respond to them. Every word you say will feed them. Let the truth sit. It'll do the work for you. I wanted to believe him, but by morning, my photo was everywhere. Screenshots, cropped headlines, edited captions. They had already decided who I was. Still, I wasn't helpless anymore. I took screenshots, cataloged timestamps, archived every rumor with the same care I once used to fold family photos into albums. Truth now had proof. Digital, dated, undeniable. The next ping came at 2:14 p.m., a forwarded thread showing him emailing the same PR consultant after the court filing. He was furious about the exposure. His words burned through the screen. We need to bury her before the hearing. I read it twice, then whispered to the empty room, You buried me once, never again. The sound of a notification followed, sharp and almost rhythmic, a single note that filled the space like a pulse. I didn't turn it off this time. I let it ring, again and again, each chime a heartbeat reminding me I was still here. That night, I drafted a short statement for the attorney. Truth has a sound, and I'm not muting mine. Outside, lights flickered across the street, neighbors watching, judging, maybe fearing their turn under the lens. By dawn, the posts multiplied faster than I could track. But they weren't all lies now. Someone had leaked the email thread, the real one. My words, my evidence, my side. I didn't share my story first. I never got the chance. They shared my story before I could. He took nothing but left everything broken. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. Every sound felt like an intrusion, every creak a reminder of what had once filled this space. The curtains still swayed from the open window, slow and uncertain, like they too were deciding whether to stay or leave. The court order arrived that morning, all joint accounts frozen, all assets under review. The attorney called it progress. I called it the sound of something ending cleanly, at last. You'll need to come in, he said. There are findings you should see yourself. I drove there with the kind of numb focus only exhaustion gives. When he slid the file across the table, I saw the numbers. Precise, undeniable. Hidden accounts, quiet transfers, a trail that led to $45,000 in unreported funds. Your signature appears here, he said, pointing to a line on one statement. I shook my head. That's not mine. He leaned closer. A notary log confirms someone signed in your name. Same day, same initials. It's forgery. We can prove it. The word prove carried a strange comfort. After so much disbelief, proof felt like air returning to lungs long collapsed. He pushed another folder forward. Deeds, documents, property lists. We'll file for equitable division. You'll get your share. Maybe even justice. Justice. I'd stopped believing in that word a long time ago. When I returned home, the house looked smaller somehow. Dust had settled on the furniture, untouched since the day he left. I walked through each room, our bedroom, the study, the kitchen, and each carried its own ghost. In the corner of the hallway stood the old safe box, half hidden behind a curtain. I'd forgotten it existed. The metal was cold beneath my fingertips as I turned the dial. Inside were documents, receipts, letters, small proofs of his double life. One envelope caught my eye, a jewelry store receipt dated 3 years ago. 2 identical rings purchased on the same day. He had promised me that ring was unique. I sat on the floor, the cold metal of the safe against my leg, and stared at that paper until the ink blurred. "He never duplicated love," I whispered. "He mass-produced it." Outside, wind pressed against the glass, and the curtain fluttered like a pulse. The attorney called again in the evening. "He's trying to push back," he said. "Threats through his lawyers, claims you manipulated evidence." I laughed, tired. "He's fighting ghosts now." "Be ready for tomorrow," the attorney said. "The hearing's public. People will talk." "Let them," I replied. "Silence protected him. Noise will ruin him." I spent the night walking through empty rooms, the house both a battlefield and a grave. The air felt cold, metallic somehow, like truth itself. I opened drawers, checked closets, traced old dust lines where his things once sat. Everything he left behind was broken, but what remained was mine. At one point, I stopped by the safe again and touched the ring receipt. Proof had weight, and now it rested in my hands. In the corner, the curtains billowed once more. For the first time, I didn't pull them shut. Tomorrow, he faces the crowd. They called his name twice, and both wives stood. The courtroom stilled. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to hesitate, trapped in the thick air of curiosity and judgment. I could feel every eye turning, first toward me, then toward her, the other woman who shared my past without ever knowing it. 2 lives rising at once to answer one lie. The clerk's voice trembled. "Please confirm your identities for the record." We didn't look at each other. We didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. We were both here for the same truth and for the same man. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." Our attorney rose, calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, this case concerns deliberate deception, dual marriage, and financial misrepresentation. Both women, present today, were led to believe they were his only lawful wife." The crowd murmured. The sound swelled and folded into itself like a living thing. He sat at the defense table, hands clasped too tightly, jaw set in feigned control. The overhead lamps cast a white glare across his face. He avoided my eyes, but I could see the tremor in his shoulders. When it was my turn to testify, I stood slowly. My knees wanted to shake, but my voice refused. "For years," I began, "I believed loyalty was built on silence. I was wrong." The microphone caught every word, its metallic hum mixing with my heartbeat. "He promised me security," I continued, "but what he built was illusion. Documents forged, dates overlapped, accounts hidden. He made a home out of lies." A few gasps rose from the benches. The attorney nodded at me to continue. I reached into the envelope, sliding the first page forward. Notarized deed with my forged signature. "This," I said, "is proof that I was erased to make room for someone else." The judge leaned forward. "You are certain this is not your handwriting?" "Certain," I said. "The notary record, entry 47B, confirms I wasn't even in the city that day." He shifted in his chair, his lawyer whispering something urgent. For the first time, he looked directly at me, anger, not guilt, blazing in his eyes. Then came her turn. The second wife rose, her voice softer but no less firm. "He told me she was a distant cousin. He used her name on property documents to avoid taxes. I believed him." The courtroom rippled with whispers again. The judge tapped the bench sharply. "Order." Our attorney handed over the final piece of evidence, a notice from the Marriage Bureau, stamped and signed, reference 19A 47F. The judge examined it in silence. "The records," he said slowly, "show 2 marriage certificates. Same man, overlapping years. How do you explain that?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The lie had finally run out of breath. The second wife looked at him, voice breaking. "You told me she was gone." He clenched his fists. "They misunderstand." "Enough," the judge interrupted. "You will have your turn." The arbiter, seated beside the bench, spoke quietly but firmly. "Your Honor, this case sets precedent. 2 signatures, same day, same identity. Fraud is evident." I could hear someone in the gallery whisper, "He married them both." The judge turned to the bailiff. "Record the transcript for public review." The typing began, each keystroke a nail sealing his truth. He lowered his gaze then, the defiance draining from his face. His fingers twisted the ring on his hand as though it might save him. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. The judge's voice broke the stillness. "Remove the ring," he said, his tone absolute. He froze. "The court orders it," the judge repeated. "That symbol no longer belongs to you." He hesitated only a second before sliding it off, slowly, painfully, like peeling away his own disguise. The sound of metal against wood was small, but in that silence, it was everything. The judge demanded he remove his ring. Faith returned, but through flashlights and microphones. By the time I reached the church, reporters had already claimed the steps. Their cameras blinked like restless eyes, each flash catching fragments of what used to be sacred ground. The bells above tolled faintly, out of rhythm, as though even faith itself struggled to keep time with the truth. They were waiting for me, not as a woman scorned, but as a witness. The priest stood at the door, his expression drawn, shoulders heavy beneath the weight of the spectacle. "I didn't think it would come to this," he murmured. "Neither did I said softly. "But lies prayed under your roof deserve light." Microphones crowded forward, voices tangled. "Do you have a statement?" someone shouted. "Is it true he forged the vows here?" I took a breath that tasted of cold air and dust. "It's true," I said. "The ceremony wasn't real. The faith I carried was built on fraud." The cameras clicked, sharp and endless. Their sound filled the air like a second storm. One reporter stepped closer, a woman with kind eyes but a relentless tone. "Why speak now?" she asked. "Because silence built his kingdom," I answered. "And silence ends today." There was a murmur through the crowd, some whispers of pity, others of respect. The bells rang again, this time fuller, steadier. It almost sounded like agreement. Across the courtyard he appeared, flanked by lawyers and flashes. His head was low, his smile gone. I watched as he tried to dodge the lenses, but there was nowhere left to turn. The world had become a mirror, and every reflection betrayed him. A voice called from the back. "Do you regret loving him?" I turned toward the sound. "No, I regret believing him. There's a difference." The priest shifted, uneasy, his hands clasped tightly. "The truth is out now," he said. "Let that be enough." "Truth," I whispered, "has never been enough for men like him. It needs proof." I reached into my folder and pulled out the marriage certificate. Creased, fragile, but still legible. The ink shimmered faintly under the flashlights. "This," I said, "is the document he used to bind me. It bears his name twice, one lie per line." The crowd gasped as I raised it higher. For a moment, everything stilled, the reporters, the murmurs, even the air. Only the sound of camera shutters remained, rhythmic and steady, like a new kind of prayer. Behind me, the bells began to ring again, loud and unyielding. Their sound folded into the clicking of cameras, the two merging until faith and evidence felt indistinguishable. He tried to step forward, muttering something to his lawyer, but the crowd pressed back. Someone shouted, "Let her speak!" I didn't raise my voice, but it carried. He stole years, homes, names. He built 2 lives and left 2 graves behind. Now he can live with both. A reporter asked, "What do you want now? Revenge?" "No," I said. "Accountability, the kind he can't hide from." The priest bowed his head. "May justice cleanse what deceit defiled." As the interview ended, flashes erupted like fireworks. The bells struck their final note, and for once the sound didn't ache, it declared. The air smelled faintly of rain and electricity. I looked toward the sky, the church behind me, the cameras ahead. He stood frozen by the gate, blinded by the light meant for truth. He couldn't hide from the lenses anymore. The courtroom smelled of paper and finality. Every seat was filled. The air trembled with whispers, with the low rustle of suits and the occasional scrape of a chair. I sat still, palms flat on the table, eyes fixed on the bench where the judge reviewed the last page of the judgment file. Ink bled faintly through the paper, fresh, deliberate, irreversible. He stood across from me, hands folded, face drawn in that same familiar arrogance he once used as armor. But it didn't shield him now. His lawyer murmured something, but he didn't respond. For the first time, silence seemed to fit him. The judge cleared his throat. "This court finds," he began, "that the secondary marriage was entered under fraudulent pretense in violation of state law. The union is hereby annulled." The words rang sharp and certain. They cut through years of confusion and shame. He didn't flinch. He just stared down at the table as though looking for the hole where his lies had fallen through. The judge continued, "Restitution is ordered in the amount of $60,000 to compensate for emotional distress and misappropriated assets. $60,000. I'd seen larger numbers in ledgers, smaller ones on receipts, but never had a number felt so personal. It wasn't about money. It was the translation of pain into something measurable, finally acknowledged. The defendant will also issue a public written apology, to be published in 2 local papers within 10 days. A murmur spread through the room, but the gavel strike silenced it instantly. My ally, the attorney who'd become the quiet backbone of this fight, leaned toward me. "It's done," he whispered. "It's over." I nodded, but inside, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. When the clerk handed me the final judgment file to sign, the scent of ink rose, strong, clean, almost ceremonial. My name was printed neatly beside the line. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I picked up the pen. Each stroke was deliberate. Each letter reclaimed something I'd lost. My identity had been forged once. Now it was restored by my own hand. Across the room, he shifted slightly. His fingers brushed the ring still resting on the table, the same ring he'd once slipped on my hand with vows that had expired long before the court declared them void. The judge looked up. "Do you have anything to say before we adjourn?" He lifted his gaze, voice low. "I never meant for this to go so far." The attorney beside me leaned closer. "He's lying again," he muttered. I looked at the man I had once trusted. "You never meant for it to end," I said quietly. "That's what this is really about." For a second, he almost smiled. Then the bailiff stepped forward, collecting documents, and the illusion cracked. When the gavel struck again, its sound echoed through the hall, one clean, final note that left no room for doubt. The crowd stood, some applauding softly, others whispering names, verdicts, pity. I didn't stay to listen. Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of dust and polished wood. My lawyer caught up to me. "You'll get the certified copy tomorrow," he said, "and the restitution within 30 days. I nodded. "I don't need the money," I said, "just the quiet." He smiled gently. "Then consider this piece paid in full." The sunlight beyond the courthouse doors was bright, almost too bright after the dimness inside. For the first time in years, I didn't shield my eyes. I walked down the steps slowly, one hand brushing the railing, the other holding the signed document, the proof of my release. I paused halfway down, breathing in the crisp air. The city moved as if unaware that something irreversible had just happened. Behind me, the bells of a nearby chapel began to ring, faint and distant, as though closing a ceremony that had lasted far too long. I looked at the page one last time, my signature still glistening in black ink. Freedom had a signature, and it was mine. Every morning, the chair still waits for him. It sits by the window, facing the same direction it always did, as if time itself never learned he was gone. The morning light spills across the fabric, tracing the faint crease where he once leaned. I used to pull it back to straighten the rug, but now I leave it exactly as it is. Some absences deserve to be seen, The house feels lighter now, yet not hollow. The noise that used to echo from room to room has softened into a calm hum, like walls finally exhaling after years of holding their breath. I can move through the space without bracing for argument, for deception, for the quiet dread that lived behind every door. The attorney sent the final envelope last week, certified, sealed, conclusive. I opened it once, read the court's closing statement, and folded it away. The ink smelled faintly of something final, something clean. I kept one newspaper clipping from the day after the verdict. Fraud case ends in restitution, public apology ordered. I didn't need the headline, but I framed it anyway. Not for vanity, for memory. Today I began sorting through drawers I hadn't touched in months. Old receipts, duplicate keys, letters unsigned. The past came in layers, brittle paper, fading ink, and things that no longer mattered. I burned most of them in the small steel tray he once used for bills. Watching them curl and turn to ash, I realized justice doesn't always roar. It sometimes sighs. One diary page caught my eye. It was dated 3 years before everything fell apart. My handwriting looked younger. Even the loops in the words felt trusting. He promised today that we'd never keep secrets again. I almost smiled. The irony wasn't bitter anymore, just tired. I folded that page neatly and placed it in an envelope without a name. It's a letter I'll never send. Some words only exist so they can be written, not read. By noon, the light shifted, climbing across the table until it touched the rim of my teacup. I poured 2 cups out of habit, then paused. My hand hovered for a moment before I poured the second one back. The sound of the liquid against porcelain felt like a confession. I walked to the window. Outside, the world continued without notice. Cars passing, children shouting, a dog barking at nothing. Ordinary life, the kind that once felt impossible. The chair caught my reflection in the glass, empty, patient, unaccusing. I realized it had stopped being a monument to loss. It had become proof of survival. Every morning that it sits untouched is a reminder that I stayed, that I endured, that I chose peace over pretending. Sometimes at night, I still hear echoes, his laugh from another room, the faint rustle of paper, the way the house would settle after an argument. I don't chase them away. Healing doesn't erase. It learns to coexist. A friend called earlier, asking if I planned to move. No, I said. This is my home. I just need to rearrange what stays. I didn't mean furniture. Before dusk, I opened the windows to let in the cool air. The light through the glass turned gold, washing over the chair. It looked almost gentle now, its edges softened by time and sun. I stood there for a long while, letting the stillness wrap around me, not as loneliness, but as quiet recognition that the worst had passed. When I turned to make tea again, I reached automatically for 2 cups. My hand stopped halfway. I smiled. I finally stopped setting 2 cups. Truth changes nothing, and yet everything. The therapist's office smelled faintly of cedar and ink, the kind of scent that anchors a person to the present. The walls were bare except for a mirror near the bookshelf. It wasn't large, but its reflection caught just enough light to remind me I was still here, solid, visible, no longer fading behind someone else's lies. "Let's try the exercise," she said gently. "Write a letter to the version of you who didn't know any of this yet." I hesitated. My hands hovered over the paper, the pen waiting like a patient witness. For a moment, I didn't know where to begin. Then the first line came, slow but certain. "You were not foolish for loving him. You were brave for believing in something better." The ink spread evenly across the textured paper. My handwriting looked calmer than I felt. "You thought loyalty meant silence, that strength meant staying. You mistook endurance for love. But love never demanded blindness. It just asked for honesty, and you gave that freely." The therapist sat quietly, not interrupting. Her presence felt like air, unseen but necessary. I paused to look at the mirror. The face staring back was mine, but steadier. The lines near my eyes had deepened, not from sadness, but from seeing too much truth and surviving it. "You lost years," I wrote, "but not yourself. You were buried, not gone, and now you're learning to breathe in your own name again." I pressed the pen harder, the pressure leaving small dents beneath each word. The texture of the paper felt almost like skin, fragile but forgiving. "He broke promises, not you. He lied to keep power, not peace. You don't need to hate him to heal. You just need to stop carrying what was never yours to hold." The words blurred slightly, not from tears, but from the quiet rhythm of release. The therapist asked softly, "What would you say to her now?" I smiled faintly. That she's safe, that she did enough, that she can stop apologizing for surviving. I folded the letter in half and ran my thumb along the crease. "Do I keep it?" I asked. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe you just needed to write it." The light shifted, catching in the mirror again. I noticed something I hadn't before, the small, determined lift at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't defiance, it was recognition. I thought of all the versions of me that had existed, the believer, the fighter, the one who almost gave up. They weren't strangers anymore. They were chapters, and I had finally turned the page. When I looked back at the paper, I added one final line. "I forgive you for everything you didn't know. I honor you for everything you became." The therapist nodded. "That's enough for today." I placed the folded note on the table, watching the pen roll beside it. The room was silent, but it wasn't the same silence I once feared. It was the sound of completion. As I stood, my reflection steadied once more in the glass. I met my own eyes without flinching. There was no trace of the woman who once begged for answers that never came. Outside, the afternoon light fell across the pavement like a quiet benediction. The world hadn't changed, but I had. I walked out holding nothing but air, and it felt like everything I'd ever needed. Healing was never silent again. I opened the drawer again, but for peace, not proof. The same creak greeted me, the same small protest of wood against memory. For years that sound had been the opening note of pain, the doorway to everything I wished I could unremember. But today, it sounded different, less like warning, more like welcome. Inside, the scent of lavender drifted up, soft and steady. It had once been the smell of paralysis, of nights I'd sit here, trembling, unfolding papers that burned more than they revealed. Now, that same scent carried calm. The sachet tucked in the corner hadn't changed. I had. The old certificate still lay beneath a neat stack of envelopes, its edges slightly curled from time. I lifted it carefully, as one might lift an artifact from a past life. The ink had faded to the color of regret. My name was still there, printed beside his, bound by lies that no longer held any weight. I traced the embossed seal with one fingertip and whispered, "You don't own me anymore." A breeze from the window stirred the curtains, brushing against my shoulder like quiet affirmation. I took out my own document, a small, worn diary bound in navy cloth. Its pages held the truth in my own handwriting, not the fabricated promises of someone else's ambition. Line by line, those pages had carried me through the trial, the silence, the rebuilding. I flipped to the first entry. "The truth doesn't heal by hiding. It heals by being heard." For a moment, I just stared at that sentence. It felt like it had been written by a stranger who somehow knew I would survive. I placed the diary inside the drawer, right where the certificate had always been. One replaced the other, not erased, but rewritten. "Closure isn't forgetting," I murmured. "It's choosing what deserves to stay." The faint lavender lingered, the same fragrance that once clung to courtroom clothes and sleepless nights. Only now, it didn't sting. It soothed. I looked at an old photograph that had slipped to the back of the drawer. 2 people smiling before they knew what betrayal smelled like. I almost put it away, But then I stopped. Instead, I tucked it between the diary's pages. It belonged there, framed by the truth that followed. The house was quiet. Afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the floor. The same light that once revealed his absence now illuminated my peace. Every corner of the room felt lighter. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. I thought of all the days I'd spent in this room counting losses, and how, without realizing it, I'd begun to count beginnings instead. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a sound I used to resent. Now it simply reminded me that life keeps moving, even when hearts hesitate. I took a deep breath, and the lavender filled my lungs. Once, it had been the smell of endings. Now it was the scent of continuation. I closed the drawer gently, pressing my hand over the wood as if sealing a promise. Some stories end with doors slammed shut. Mine ends with a drawer quietly closing. I stood, letting the last thread of sunlight fall across my hands. The papers inside, the false and the real, rested together now, neither erased nor exalted, simply part of the same history. I turned toward the window, toward the brightness waiting beyond it. This time the paper smelled of freedom,